What if I told you that the most dangerous cancer doesn't start in your lungs, your brain, or even your heart, but right on the surface of your skin? That thin, fragile layer you've probably ignored your whole life could be hiding a silent killer. Most people think of skin problems as harmless freckles, age spots, or maybe a mole that just looks ugly. But what if one of those innocent marks is actually plotting against you? Imagine a cancer so cunning that it doesn't just grow on your skin. It finds its way into your bloodstream, travels to your vital organs, and quietly turns into a death sentence. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the dark truth about malignant melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer. And the terrifying part, anyone, no matter their skin color, no matter their age, can fall victim. Welcome to the Wellness Way, where today we uncover the shocking reality of when skin cancer becomes deadly. By the end of this video, you'll know how to spot the hidden warning signs, why early detection saves lives, and what you must do to protect yourself and your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to the Wellness Way so we can keep bringing you powerful, life-saving insights. When I used to think about skin, I saw it as nothing more than a kind of protective wrapping, something that kept me intact, held my body together, and maybe gave me an appearance that others would notice. It was easy to treat it as a background feature, like wallpaper in a house. You notice it sometimes, but you don't really think about how much it's doing for you every single day. That changed the moment I started learning about skin cancer. Suddenly, the largest organ of the body didn't feel like background anymore. It felt like the front line. What shocked me the most was realizing how fragile this front line really is. Our skin is not just a surface. It's an active, living organ that protects, heals, and regenerates constantly. And yet, in that fragile top layer, the epidermis, something dangerous can silently begin. Something that looks small, harmless, even unworthy of attention. Until it isn't. Most people assume that skin cancer is just a cosmetic issue. Ugly moles, embarrassing spots, or maybe a patch of dry skin you don't like to look at. I used to think that way too, but the truth is much darker. Within the paper-thin epidermis lie two main kinds of cells, keratinocytes and melanocytes. Keratinocytes are the workhorses, making up about 90% of the epidermis, while melanocytes are fewer, only around 8%. Yet these melanocytes hold a terrifying power. They're meant to produce melanin, a pigment that protects our DNA from ultraviolet damage. But when they go rogue, they can give rise to one of the deadliest cancers known to humans, malignant melanoma. To really understand why this matters, let me paint the picture the way I saw it unfold. Imagine a simple freckle on your skin. Most of us have them. Some are genetic, some appear after sun exposure. They don't hurt, they don't itch, they don't seem threatening. But within that small dot could be cells dividing abnormally, preparing to break free from the very rules that keep our bodies balanced. While basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, two other common forms of skin cancer, tend to grow upward and outward, staying relatively close to the surface, melanoma has a different strategy. It digs downward, and when it reaches the blood vessels below, it's like a prisoner breaking out of confinement. Suddenly it can travel anywhere. The brain, the lungs, the liver. That's when skin cancer isn't just skin deep anymore. That's when it becomes deadly. What unsettles me is how deceptive it all is. People with darker skin sometimes believe they're safe, as though melanin gives them a shield. And yes, melanin does provide some natural protection against UV damage. But some is not the same as absolute. Melanoma doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about skin tone, nationality, or age. In fact, in darker skin tones, the danger is often more insidious because lesions can be harder to notice. A mole that looks unremarkable might be evolving into something far more sinister, and because it blends in, people discover it too late. I remember hearing the statistic that basal cell carcinoma accounts for nearly 78% of skin cancers. At first, that number made me feel oddly relieved. Well, If most cases are basal cell, then maybe the danger isn't that high. But then I learned the real story. Yes, basal cell carcinoma is common, but melanoma, though less frequent, is far more lethal. It only needs one chance to enter your bloodstream, and the story changes completely. It's like comparing a slow-moving storm that floods your street to a sudden tornado that destroys your entire neighborhood. Frequency doesn't matter when the impact is so disproportionate. I couldn't help but look back at my own skin habits. How many times had I shrugged off sunscreen because it felt greasy or inconvenient? How many times did I think, it's just a few minutes in the sun? What's the harm? How many little freckles or moles had I ignored because I assumed they were just part of getting older? That's the problem with skin cancer. It hides in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary, and we only pay attention when it's too late. The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. The skin is not just a passive cover, it's constantly fighting for us. It renews itself every month, shedding old cells and building new ones. It waterproofs us, locks in hydration, and forms a barrier against infection. It is alive in a way we often forget. So when that same system goes haywire, when those very cells that are supposed to protect us start to multiply uncontrollably, it feels like a betrayal. And yet, it's not the skin's fault. It's often ours. Prolonged, unprotected sun exposure bombards our DNA with ultraviolet radiation, triggering the mutations that spark cancer. The tanning beds, the endless afternoons at the beach without protection, even the daily commutes where the sun hits your arm through the car window, all of it adds up. I've come to realize that the scariest part of skin cancer isn't the disease itself. It's the delay. The belief that it won't happen to me. The tendency to dismiss or ignore subtle signs because they don't fit our idea of danger. We've been trained to fear heart attacks, strokes, or lung cancer, but rarely do we talk about that mole on our arm that changed shape or grew larger. And that silence, that collective underestimation, is part of why melanoma is so deadly. Now, when I look at my skin, I don't just see freckles and moles. I see signals. I see stories. Some marks are harmless memories of childhood sunburns, but others could be warnings. That realization makes me treat my skin differently. I don't ignore it anymore. I study it, I check it, and I respect it in a way I never did before. And that's what I want others to feel too. Skin cancer isn't just about statistics or scary medical terms. It's about recognizing that the largest organ of your body, something you see every single day, is also one of the easiest to overlook. When you begin to see it for what it really is, the perspective shifts. The freckles aren't just freckles, the mole isn't just a mole. The sunburn isn't just temporary pain. They're part of a much larger conversation your body is trying to have with you. The question is, are you willing to listen? When I first started diving deeper into the science of skin cancer, I was struck by the irony of it all. The epidermis, the top layer of skin, looks paper thin when you examine it on a cadaver. And yet, when magnified under a microscope, it can be more than 50 cell layers thick. This thin slice of life is where almost the entire drama of skin cancer begins and ends. It's fascinating, but also terrifying. Let me tell you what makes this layer such a complicated battlefield. The epidermis is made up mostly of keratinocytes, cells that bind together, flake off, and constantly renew the skin. They're the silent workers, the ones doing their job without us ever noticing. But among them are melanocytes, fewer in number but far more critical than they appear. They produce melanin, which acts like an internal shield protecting the DNA inside our cells from ultraviolet light. Think of melanin like an umbrella each cell holds up against the sun's radiation. Without it, every ray would directly strike our DNA, causing mutations at a rate that the body couldn't keep up with. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. The very system designed to protect us can also betray us. Melanocytes sometimes grow out of control, forming malignant melanoma. unlike basal cell carcinoma or squamous cell carcinoma. Melanoma doesn't just sit on the surface. It digs downward into the dermis where the blood vessels are. Once it gets there, it has a passport to the entire body. That's why melanoma can be so deadly compared to the others. It spreads. I'll never forget the way this was explained to me. Basal and squamous cell cancers are like weeds growing upward in your garden. They're annoying, invasive, but they usually stay in one place. Melanoma, on the other hand, is like roots pushing down into the soil, breaking through pipes, and reaching places they were never meant to go. By the time you notice the damage on the surface, the destruction underground may already be catastrophic. What makes this even more complicated is how easily we underestimate it. I used to think skin cancer had a clear look, a nasty sore, a mole that looked scary, something obviously wrong. But the truth is, many dangerous lesions look ordinary. Some even mimic freckles, sunspots, or age spots. The video I studied pointed out lentigines, sun-induced freckles that often appear on the face or arms. They're harmless in many cases, but visually they're nearly indistinguishable from something that could kill you. That ambiguity is unsettling. And then there's the mole, technically called a nevus. Most are benign, just an overgrowth of melanocytes that create a small bump. But sometimes that mole starts changing, growing asymmetrical, altering in color, or expanding beyond a safe size. That's when it crosses into the danger zone. What strikes me is how easy it is to dismiss these changes. We rationalize, it's probably nothing, or we tell ourselves we'll check it later. Later for some people is too late. The other irony is that skin cancer doesn't only come from years of tanning or decades of exposure. Yes, cumulative sun damage matters, but even a single intense burn during childhood can plant the seeds. The mutations may sit dormant for years waiting for the right conditions. By the time you're in your 40s or 50s, the damage you brushed off in your teens could resurface in ways you never imagined. That realization made me rethink every summer afternoon I spent outdoors without sunscreen. I found myself reflecting on my own relationship with the sun. Growing up, I celebrated a tan as a sign of health. Friends would compliment how golden my skin looked after vacations. Nobody ever said, "Wow, that sunburn might increase your risk of cancer someday." We don't frame it that way because the threat is invisible in the moment. The pain of a burn fades, the tan eventually disappears, but the DNA mutations, they remain. And each one is like a tiny crack in the foundation of a house. On its own, maybe not catastrophic, but enough cracks, and one day the house collapses. This is why early detection becomes so critical. Doctors talk about the ABCDE rule: asymmetry, border, color, diameter, and evolving. It's simple, enough to memorize, but powerful enough to save lives. When I first learned it, I started examining my own skin differently. I realized that not all my moles were perfectly symmetrical. Some had fuzzy edges, most were stable, but there were one or two that made me pause. That pause is the difference between life and death for many people, whether they follow up with a dermatologist or whether they ignore it. The harsh truth is that melanoma often kills not because it's impossible to treat, but because it's ignored until it's too late. When caught early, survival rates are high. But once it spreads, the story changes dramatically. I think that's what makes it so chilling. It gives us chances to stop it, but we don't take them seriously. For me, this isn't just a medical lesson. It's a personal wake-up call. I've started scheduling annual skin checks. I wear sunscreen daily now, not just when I go to the beach. I notice the spots on my arms, my neck, even the ones on my back that I used to dismiss. And the most important shift. I stopped treating my skin as an afterthought. It's not a decoration. It's an organ that needs the same vigilance as my heart, lungs, or brain. The paradox of skin cancer is that it's both highly preventable and potentially deadly. It's a disease that thrives on our neglect, on our casual disregard for the warning signs. And yet, prevention doesn't require some miracle drug or breakthrough technology. It requires sunscreen, awareness, and the humility to admit that a tiny mole might mean more than we think. When I look at my skin now, I don't just see the freckles or the slight imperfections. I see a battlefield where my cells are constantly fighting invisible enemies. Sometimes they win, but sometimes a single mutation changes the outcome of the war. That thought doesn't scare me into paranoia. It motivates me into action. It makes me want to protect this organ that protects me every single day. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Skin cancer is not just a disease of the skin. It's a reminder that neglecting small things can have enormous consequences. What you brush off as a freckle or a sunspot could be your body's way of asking for help. The question is whether you're listening. By the time I reached the end of my deep dive into skin cancer, one message kept echoing in my mind. Prevention and awareness are not luxuries, they're lifelines. It's unsettling to realize how many of us walk around with warning signs written directly on our skin, and yet fail to see them. Maybe we're too busy, maybe we're in denial, or maybe we've just been conditioned to think of skin as a cosmetic layer, rather than a living organ screaming for attention. That's why I found the ABCDE rules so empowering. It transforms something vague and overwhelming into something practical. Asymmetry, border, color, diameter, evolving, simple letters, but they give you a roadmap. For me, it was almost like learning a new language, the language of my skin. Suddenly, I had a way to interpret the freckles, the moles, the spots that dotted my arms and shoulders. I could ask the right questions instead of blindly ignoring them. What makes this rule powerful isn't just its accuracy, it's the confidence it gives ordinary people. You don't need to be a dermatologist to notice when a mole looks irregular. You don't need a medical degree to see that a spot has changed over time. Of course, you do need a professional to confirm and treat. But that first step, the awareness, belongs to you. That realization changed how I interact with my own body. But awareness alone is only half the story. The other half is prevention. It's incredible to think about how something as simple as sunscreen can save lives. For years, I dismissed it as a product for the beach or for people obsessed with beauty. I didn't realize it was a shield against DNA damage. A literal barrier between me and mutations that could become fatal. Now, it feels like brushing my teeth, an act of maintenance I wouldn't skip because the consequences are far too high. Of course, sunscreen is just the beginning. Avoiding prolonged, unprotected sun exposure, wearing protective clothing, and scheduling annual skin checks. These are the habits that stack up, the small decisions that build a fortress over time. And the truth is, none of them are dramatic. They're not costly, they're not complicated, and they don't require advanced technology. They require discipline, humility, and the willingness to care about a problem before it becomes a crisis. What strikes me most is how different skin cancer is from many other illnesses. With heart disease or diabetes, prevention often means long-term lifestyle changes. Diet, exercise, medication. With skin cancer, prevention is often immediate and visible. You can literally see the risk forming on your body. You can literally block the primary cause, UV radiation, with a layer of cream. That simplicity makes it almost unforgivable when we ignore it. And yet, I understand why people do. Skin feels resilient. It heals quickly from cuts. It toughens with calluses. It bronzes with sun. It tricks us into thinking it can take any punishment we throw at it. But beneath that illusion lies fragility. Every tan is a wound. Every burn is a scar written into your DNA. Every ignored mole is a missed opportunity. Recognizing that was painful for me because it forced me to confront the careless ways I had treated my skin in the past. But here's the thing. Regret is useless unless it fuels change. And so I began to reframe the way I saw my daily routines. Putting on sunscreen wasn't vanity. It was survival. Scheduling a skin exam wasn't paranoia. It was responsibility. Asking a doctor about a mole wasn't overreacting. It was vigilance. These changes didn't make me weaker. They made me stronger, more in control of my own future. And I think that's the message we need to spread. Skin cancer isn't an inevitable fate. It's not some shadow that descends without warning. It's a disease with clear causes, visible warning signs, and straightforward prevention strategies. It's one of the few cancers where everyday people can truly make a difference in their own outcomes, but only if we care enough to act. What also struck me while reflecting on this journey is how connected our health is to our mindset. When we treat skin as decoration, we don't respect it. When we treat it as an organ, a living shield, we become protective. That shift in perspective is subtle but transformative. I went from ignoring my freckles to monitoring them. I went from rolling my eyes at sunscreen to valuing it as essential armor. I went from dismissing annual checkups to seeing them as a privilege, an opportunity to catch something early and save my own life. And maybe the most important part of this shift is sharing it, because awareness spreads. When one person starts paying attention, they encourage others. I've noticed that when I bring up the ABCDE rule with friends, they start looking at their own moles differently. When I talk about scheduling skin checks, people around me consider doing the same. That ripple effect matters, because melanoma doesn't just threaten individuals. It threatens families, communities, entire networks of people who might think they're safe until they're not. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you really looked at your skin? Not in the mirror for vanity's sake, but with curiosity, with vigilance. When was the last time you studied a mole and asked if it had changed? When was the last time you put on sunscreen without making excuses? If your answer is, I don't remember, then maybe today is the day to start. I don't want to live in fear of my skin. And I don't want anyone else to either, but I do want to live with respect for it, with the understanding that the marks on my body are not just random, but potentially meaningful. The choice is not between fear and ignorance. The choice is between awareness and neglect. And given what I've learned, I know exactly which side I want to be on. Because at the end of the day, skin cancer isn't just about skin. It's about how we value life, how we prioritize prevention, and how we respond to the signals our bodies are sending. And if we choose to listen, really listen, then maybe fewer of us will have to learn too late that the smallest spot can carry the heaviest consequences. When I look back on everything I've learned about skin cancer, one truth stands above the rest. The smallest details can carry the greatest weight. A freckle that changes shape. A mole that grows slightly larger. A patch of skin that doesn't heal the way it should. These things seem trivial, easy to overlook, but they can be the difference between life and death. That realization has changed the way I see not just my skin, but my entire relationship with health. For years, I treated my skin like an afterthought. I cared about how it looked, but not about what it might be trying to tell me. I shrugged off sunscreen, ignored spots, and assumed that serious diseases were something that happened to other people. But learning about melanoma, the way it digs deep, the way it spread silently, forced me to face reality. Our skin is not just decoration. It is an organ, a shield, and sometimes a messenger. And when it speaks, we need to listen. The biggest lesson I take from this is the power of prevention and early detection. We can't control everything in life, but we can control whether or not we check our skin. We can choose to wear sunscreen, to schedule an annual exam, to ask a doctor about a mole instead of brushing it off. These small acts may not feel dramatic in the moment, but they can rewrite the story of our future. Prevention is never flashy, but it's the quiet hero that saves lives. On a deeper level, this has also made me think about how often we ignore small signals in other areas of life. Just as we overlook moles or sunspots, we sometimes dismiss warning signs in our relationships, our mental health, or our daily routines. We wait until the problem grows too large to ignore, and by then, the damage is harder to repair. Skin cancer is a metaphor for this human tendency. The lesson it teaches is universal. Pay attention early, act early, and respect the signs, no matter how small. For me personally, I've embraced this as a new kind of mindfulness. I don't just look in the mirror to judge appearances anymore. I look for changes, for patterns, for clues my body might be giving me. I've learned to see my skin not as a surface, but as a storyteller. And every story it tells deserves to be heard. So now I want to turn the question to you. When was the last time you truly paid attention to your skin? Not for how it looked, but for what it might be telling you. Share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective might inspire someone else to take their health more seriously. And if you found value in this conversation, please subscribe to The Wellness Way. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating content that not only informs but also empowers you to protect your health and live more fully.